Good morning. Let's have some fun together for the next 15, 20 minutes. This is a small enough group that hopefully we can make it interactive. So my team and I had some fun coming up with this title. This is my first time at HealthSpaces. You'll hear me as an outsider kind of speaking about this space. I'm going to synthesize what I've learned hearing from many of the leaders, many of you, about what you're looking for in the space. I come from California, from Silicon Valley. We're a tech company. What are we doing here? You're going to learn about that. We make this thing called the Smart Window, which we'll talk about. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about my background and what brought me here. And before I do that, I want to introduce my colleagues. Piers McNaughton, who's in the corner over there. Dr. McNaughton, he came to us from Harvard School of Public Health about 4 years ago and done tremendous research around outcomes for people in buildings, specifically in healthcare settings as well. So you're going to see a little bit of data there. Michael Gorgiulo, he's based here in Dallas. He covers our Texas and Southeast region. So those of you local or in the Southeast region, Michael's here as well. So let's keep this interactive. So I've been building View for 14 years. And before I did this, I was involved with Moore's Law. So how many of you have heard of Moore's Law? Okay, a few of you. So those of you that don't, Moore's Law is not a law of physics. It's a prediction of rate of change. And what I learned is one of the most powerful forces in the universe is the power of compounding. And it's compounding of money, which we know about. It's compounding of knowledge. John, your talk, Tricia, we're learning. And it's compounding of things in our body. Our cells are compounding all the time. So what is Moore's Law and the power of compounding? This thing we have in our pockets, a supercomputer just, not that long ago, a few decades ago, couldn't deliver the type of computing and the capabilities we have today. And you couldn't achieve this without the advancements we had in the semiconductor industry. So Moore's Law is something coined by Gordon Moore, one of the founders of Intel. And he said about 60 years ago, back in the 50s, he said the power of a chip doubles every 18 months for the same cost, right? So fast forward 18 months, you get twice the productivity for the same cost, and do it again 18 months later, and then again, and then again. And we did that over about 60 years, and that's what enabled pretty much the modern life as we have today. And you saw how it impacted every industry as we know it. But as an outsider looking in, I look at these things because we're talking about health spaces. I said, let's look at spaces. And in the same time period, they haven't really changed that much. So one of the things I think about as an agent of change is the rate of change in different industries. And I look at why is that and what's going on. And so we're going to have some fun talking about that this morning. How many of you know this guy? Anybody know this guy? This is a group, somebody here must know who this is. Okay, Piers, who is it? Okay. How many of you heard that name? Wow. Any architects in the room? Yeah, we have some architects in our company, and they tell us that he's very famous for thinking about the building as a medical instrument. He was born prior to the opening of the last century. Alvar is from Finland. And he's most famous for thinking about building as a medical instrument. I know everyone here, one way or the other, is associated with spaces and health. And I know the primary thing people go to hospital for is to die or live a better life, right? And most people are now going there to live a better life. My younger brother's a physician, and he says he's doing a lot more elective surgeries than we used to just to save people's lives, right? So people are going to the hospital to live better. And I will tell you, the spaces have a profound impact on outcomes for these people. And I think the industry is not as well served by materials, by construction, by designs. And I think there is a huge opportunity to make a difference in the coming decades. This is what a modern kind of staging room looks like. This is what Alvar designed 1932. This was a sanitarium in Finland. And they used this space to treat tuberculosis patients. Today it's used as a children's hospital. And he's known for timeless designs, for pushing the edge of design back then. I'd rather be in the room on the right, not with TB, of course. Think about that. So something happened where we didn't just improve, but we actually went backwards somehow. So as I met leaders in the industry, and by the way, Toby Cosgrove, who retired a few years ago as the CEO of Cleveland Clinic, is the chairman of my board. So what are we doing with peers in our staff, Toby as our chairman? So Toby introduced me to a number of people in the healthcare industry, and as I talked to them, the 4 things that they taught me that matter are these 4. Exceptional patient experience. Who can disagree with that? Of course, that's what you want to deliver. Positive health outcomes. Yeah, you go to the hospital or the clinic to get better. Sustainable operations. This is new, right? This has happened in the last couple of decades, and today there's a huge movement to make the world a better place. And by the way, if you haven't read, in the last week they declared we're entering a cycle of El Nino. We've come off a cycle of La Nina, which means the ocean temperatures are rising, and all the things go out of whack just because the water temperature in the Pacific changes by ½ a degree. So we know how fragile the planet is, how interconnected the systems are, and clearly I know many of you are talking and designing with sustainability in mind. And then finally, digital infrastructure. This kind of picks up on the industry that I was part of, kind of changing the way we deliver health for patients. So these are 4 things that come across consistently as themes as I've talked to leaders in the industry, and frankly, all of you are thinking about this. So now let's switch and talk about the View story, and then tell you how we've thought about this over the last probably dozen years or so. So the product we make is a very simple thing. It's the day-to-day window. And you're building hospitals with more and more glass now. The patient rooms have bigger windows and so on. Except the problem with the window is you also have heat and glare. The problem with heat is you're putting heat in through the window. So the bigger the window, the more heat goes into the building, and you have to use big air conditioning systems to pull all the heat out. And then secondly, glare is your eyes can only take so much intensity of the light. Like right now, I'm getting blasted with these lights, which allows you to see me, but it's not comfortable to do that all day long. So what you do is you pull the shades down. And a side story about the shades and curtains, I told you my younger brother's a surgeon. He tells me the long sleeve shirts are gone. The white coats are gone because of infection control. He took off his necktie. He no longer wears a tie to go to the hospital, but the curtains are still on the windows. Think about that. So the smart window is a window the way it should be. As the sun is rising on the east, the windows on the east side of the building tint, and they tint just to the right level based on angle of the sun, the location of the sun, cloud cover or fog or any other obstructions. And then in this case in North America, the south side of the building throughout the day, and then the west side in the afternoon. And in a healthcare setting, in a patient room, you can have bedside controls where the patient can control their own setting to their liking. So very simple, hard technology. It took us about 10 years to perfect this, over $1 billion invested to take this semiconductor technology and scale it into big panes of glass. And today you'll see we're doing large projects. And again, it delivers on all the key outcomes we talked about. Okay, so enough of the looping. Anyway, I have fun showing this all the time. All right. So what does it do? It does this. So I'll show you a couple of left and right pictures. The left side is what you would have as an experience if you were in that same patient room. The right side is what you would have with a smart window. A room without windows, you can have a window with views. Same here. I heard, where's Tricia? I heard you're in some of these pictures. Yeah. And is that your daughter?
No, it's the one previous to that one. Again, there I am.
Look at that.
I'm everywhere.
Piers just pointed out. This is at University of Vermont, from what I understand. Okay. So real pictures, not fake actors, right? It's real life settings. So then if we take the same four things we talked about, exceptional patient experience, positive health outcomes, sustainable operations, and digital infrastructure. I'm an engineer. We're an engineering-oriented company. We're not going to show up and hand wave and talk wellness. We're going to get into the details and measure the data. This is some of the work that Pierce and his colleagues have done, working actually with the industry, many of you and your colleagues. So the way you measure patient experience is higher HCAHPS scores. The positive health outcomes actually measure recovery rates, right? And we can do this. Once you do this at scale and measure and do controlled experiments, you can actually study in almost like clinical trial level of data integrity. Sustainable is easy. You can measure the energy performance, you can measure peak load, and then of course, digital is how adaptive is it, how connected is it, what's the patient experience digitally. So in HCAHPS scores, this is actually a study done at University of Vermont Medical Center where there was a 16% increase in the top box scores. I understand this type of change has a big impact to the financial outcomes of the healthcare systems, right? So very direct. We're not talking about, let's put a design feature and hope that something good comes out of it. We're talking about measured performance in real life settings in numbers and percentages that matter. Infection control. We've done a bunch of studies, in this case working with the University of British Columbia and University of Washington on growth of bacteria on surfaces based on whether natural light is coming in or not. So one of the best disinfectants known is natural light. And when you cover that up with blinds and by the way, I said blinds, it's the only product I've ever come across that's named after a known human handicap. Blind. That's how dumb it is. That's how dumb it is. Like, I don't know who the marketing person was that said, let's name it a blind, right? So we got to get rid of those things. Anyway, they collect dust, they collect germs, and importantly, you're getting less light in. Buildings with view windows get about twice the natural light into space. Obviously, you have views. That's why we named ourselves View. It's something people can recognize. But in this case, measured lower infection rates. Obviously, if you block the heat from coming in the first place and you harvest the natural light, your natural lighting level goes down, your cooling loads go down, your HVAC peak loads go down. Now, this is 5 to 10% compared to about 20% in office settings, because in healthcare, you have this air exchange you drive for infection reasons. And so that actually is lower in a healthcare setting, but it's still significant. And then, of course, the entire skin of the building is now digital. Every window has its own IP addressable microcontroller. And as I said, you have bedside controls. You can have your staff or nursing staff control it. Your facilities can control it. You can change the levels of controls you have. Once it's digital, it's connected, it's in the cloud, you can program these things. So what is this? Is this kind of a cool concept? I know some of you have never heard of it. Some of you have heard but didn't know how ready it was. So we thought we'll share with you kind of the scale that we built in the last 4 or 5 years. So we're in pretty much all of the real estate verticals. Obviously, the most relevant here is healthcare. But depending on where you flew in from, you might have flown through an airport and not know that it was View Smart Windows. So DFW here, we've done 10 or so projects in the last 4 years. And eventually, the entire airport will be retrofitted with View windows, right? If you're in Charlotte, Chicago, New York, Boston, San Francisco, Memphis, I can go on and on, Phoenix, all of those airports in the new terminals have smart windows. And again, some of the best products, you don't have to name them a blind, you don't have to name them a thing. Nobody knows that they're smart windows. They just kind of pass through the airport, stay comfortable, no shades, and it's highly sustainable. Our bread and butter has been office, and you've heard that corporate campuses, offices are going down in footprint, and so where we're really ramping now is multifamily, but healthcare is a very, very important pillar for us, and we're investing in growing in this sector. So please talk to us if you're renovating or building a facility. Specific to healthcare, we've delivered probably a few dozen buildings so far. The largest hospital we've completed is about 1.8 million feet, so we've done large hospitals, but we're doing a number of medical office buildings, specialized care units. Basically, every window should be smart. There's no reason you should put a dumb window and then put blinds on it and live with the consequences. Okay, so I wanted to end with, yeah, but it sounds like whiz bang. I want it in my home, but it's probably too expensive for me, right? That used to be the case. Smart windows were about 5 times as expensive as regular windows. They've come down to 4 and 3 and 2. We're today sitting at about 1.5 times the cost. So if you would have spent $10 million on the skin of your hospital, you're going to now spend $15 million, right? But as you know, in the last year, the federal government has come up with, as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, a big set of tax credits for clean energy. About $400 billion of credits have been set aside. And typically, nonprofit organizations, most healthcare systems didn't qualify for tax credits. What happened in this recent legislation is the federal government is treating your investment as if you overpaid your taxes, and they're going to write you a rebate check back. That's a brand new provision in the new legislation. And by the way, this is not just for smart windows, but for solar panels, any other types of technologies that are included in that package. So if you didn't know that, we have experts. We can put you in touch with them, and you should talk to your tax people and get smarter about this, because the next several years of infrastructure build in every sense, whether it's an airport, office, multifamily, the government is going to participate and help you get towards net zero, because there's a goal to get to net zero, depending on your system, either 2030 up to 2050, and it won't happen magically. Somebody's got to make the investment. In this case, the federal government decided to match your investment with a tax credit. So specific to smart windows, they qualify for 30 to 50% of the credit. In most of these cases, your cases, you probably qualify for a 40% credit, because in addition to the 30% base credit, there's a 10% domestic content. So because we're a US manufacturer, proudly made in America, we create these high-tech, high-paying jobs. In this last legislation, they also added a Make in America provision, which takes it to 40%. And if you happen to have built a healthcare facility and remediated an existing energy facility, that adds for another 10%. So remember I said, if you'd have spent $10 million on windows, now you spend 15, but then you apply a 40% credit, you might even save some money up front. We're not talking about energy savings. We're not talking about better scores. So it used to be we had to show up in your office and say, it has all these benefits, and you need to spend $5 million more. And you'd be like, I'm already struggling with my budget. What do I do, right? It's the immediacy of the upfront investment. But in this case, this just got enacted last quarter. So we're quite excited. And this is going to drive a lot of investment in not only smart windows, but such technologies. So that's what I have to share. I wanted to start with the big picture, share with you my learnings, and certainly share with you our humble story of what we've done and where we're going to enable these types of positive changes in the industry. So with that, I'll take some questions. Yes?
Without a shade, what are you doing about light pollution at night?
Great question. It's actually light pollution, but also privacy, as you know, right? Especially in a patient setting. So for privacy, we always recommend in a bedroom, in a home setting, or in a hospital patient room, that you keep a curtain that gets replaced, right, from an infection control point of view. The hospitals in which View is installed, in which they put View in the patient rooms, what they did is they put a bedside curtain, but no curtain on the window. And what they did is that bedside curtain gets changed when the sheets are changed for the bed. So again, the idea is to not transport germs from one patient to the next, and to have the surfaces of the room itself be always pristine, number one. To your question on light control, actually in our, and we will probably deploy it in healthcare as well, in our residential setting, we just deployed a feature on our app. That's one of the beautiful things about having digital systems that are in the cloud, is you can keep pumping software updates long after you've installed it. And I tell people, the building is the dumbest the day it opens. It only gets smarter. So we recently pumped out a software upgrade called the sleep-in mode. Okay, and the sleep-in mode was actually, we learned this from young people. We're now in about 1,600 apartment buildings and growing very rapidly. And what we found is some unusual behavior. People were manually tinting our windows at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning for 5, 6 hours. And we said, why are people tinting them at night? You know, we're here to control the sun. Well, it turns out they were coming back from a late night party and they want to sleep in. So we now made it easy for those people to do sleep-in, and likewise for a patient, for light control. Because we block 99.5% of the light, we will be severely dimmed in any light that comes in at night. And so that allows the patient to be in a calmer, maybe even sleeping in early in the morning. But for privacy, we always recommend you keep a curtain. And as I said, probably the best practice going forward will be a bedside curtain rather than a curtain on the window. Sorry, somebody here had a question. Yes. Yeah, they're manufactured in northern Mississippi. We have almost 1 million square foot plant. If any of you are in the Memphis area, please come visit us. We're based in San Francisco Bay Area as our headquarters and our primary R&D facilities. We have 500 people that work around the clock and produce this magic. Yeah, it's a suburb of Memphis. Yes, sir. Yeah, so the question is about interior use. Today, we're not working on that as a primary focus. Some of our customers use our product for that. It's not the best for interior because you might be looking to provide an immediate change in transmission. You know, so there are technologies like LCD technologies that provide that. They're cumbersome, they don't last very long, so that technology is still under development. I think eventually we'll be doing that. Today, we're primarily focused on the exterior envelope. Yes.
Is this part of the 179D program, and how do you not provide hospitals take advantage of that?
Okay, Pierce, there may be a microphone there. Can you talk about that?
Okay, thanks. Is this part of the 179D program of the IRA, and how do not-for-profit organizations take advantage of it?
It's 48C, commercial tax credit, and the way it works from what I understand with nonprofits is, one, View now has the ability, we've basically built an insurance program to back these credits. So should you put this in your hospital or your MOB, we'll actually say, let's take the same $15 million example. Your investment is $15 million. We're going to guarantee the $5 or $6 million credit. So View takes responsibility for it, just in case there's some issue with the way it's accounted for or whatnot. But the way it works is the federal government will write you a rebate check if you're a nonprofit organization. That's a brand new provision. This is the first time ever that a tax credit is now given to a non-tax paying entity. And people have said to me, you know, why is that? They're called tax credits. Well, if you step back and think about the intent of the legislation, is to change societal infrastructure for the better. Because you're taxing the environment, you're taxing the future generations, whether you call it a for-profit or non-profit. And what happened in the past, for example, with solar, only tax-paying entities could take advantage of these, and the non-tax-paying entities ended up paying the full price. And by the way, this applies to state government entities as well. So the federal government is now writing a rebate check back to the nonprofit entities to promote, you know, making the world, you know, move towards net zero. And I think it's a clever legislation that enables everybody to take advantage of this. Any other questions?
Okay, this is going to have to be our last question.
Yeah, and Pierce, Michael, and I are around if you want to ask any other questions. Yeah, great question. So as I mentioned, we're in all these verticals. We've now done about 600 buildings. Yeah, the question was retrofitability. And yeah, in places you know, where there may be a 50-year-old hospital or even 30-year-old, we have done about 25% of our business today is retrofits. And they tend to be in places where I heard there are good location and good bones. Otherwise, you may just demolish and restart. And so one is if you're repositioning or refurbishing. The second thing, for those of you involved with facilities, and you know, John talked about a number of examples of, you know, the type of situations you deal with. You always have capital budgets for renovations and replacements and maintenance. Something a lot of people still don't know, which I'm shocked in the industry. is double pane windows are about 30 years old. So 40 years ago, it was all single pane, 100 years prior, right? When a single pane window failed, and the way it fails is the caulking leaks, and then air starts to go in and you lost the insulation. Well, somebody goes up on a ladder, takes a blade, removes that old caulking, and squeezes in with a gun the new caulking, and now it's sealed again. When a double pane window fails, you have to replace the unit because there's no way to recaulk that space between the two. It's like I tell people, you bought the first generation of automobiles and the tire manufacturer only sold tires to the car makers. Well, 30,000 miles go by and now they're selling tires to existing cars. Remember I said double pane windows are 30 years old. Double pane windows last about 30 years. So those of you that have hospitals that are 30, 35, 25 years old, you better be thinking about how do you replace those because those tires are coming and they're looking bare. And so somebody taught me that for every one building being built, there are 100 existing buildings, which means replacement windows will be, to the question, shipping to 3 times as many buildings as you're doing new buildings, right? Something also to think about. Anyway, happy to chat with you some more. Thank you very much.